Hi everyone and welcome back to the Attitude Makeover podcast. I have with me the supremely talented musical siblings, songwriter and singer Bindu Subramaniam and violinist-composer Ambi Subramaniam. Together they form the two-piece band SubraMania and are the founders of SaPa, Subramaniam Academy of Performing Arts. Children of the violin maestro Dr. L. Subramaniam, the duo is usually described as a third-generation prodigy. But this conversation dwells into who they are in spite and beyond their assumed identities, and how they have drawn from a traditional musical legacy that runs in their family and paved their own path with self-discovery and innovation. When we're preparing for this podcast, as you know, this is an unscripted podcast, one of the things we sort of pivot on is what's the guest really passionate about. And both of them were really passionate about mental health. And that's how this conversation came into being. This conversation heavily revolves around music, of course, and also on the impact of mindfulness in thoughts and actions and giving your 100% in the process. We touch upon the relevance of reinvention, identifying joy, and making a pleasant mental space for yourself and those around you. Isn't that something that we all strive to really look forward to? It's music, mental health, and much more, packed with takeaways with which you can draw simple parallels to whichever field you identify with, be it around collaboration, a culture aspect, or personal growth. If you are a musician yourself or just a music lover like me, this episode is full of relatable revelations that connect with a rhythm. As always, tune in and I hope you like it. All right, where do we start?
Not at the part where you both are defective pieces. I'm the only functional human being at this table.
Aren't you proud of that?
Yeah.
So I wanted to really get to know you guys first, because I think the honesty in the conversation really comes after you know the other person. So if you could throw some light into growing up years, and your growing up years might have been very different from many of us. So
Oh, sorry. I thought you were going to say his growing up years are different
That's
from
what I
mine, and I'm
thought.
like, wow, wow.
Like, how
She
is it?
doesn't hold back any punches.
oh my god.
Yeah, like how is it in your generation versus yours?
No, like, I came from a single parent, only mom working. Dad passed away when I was 3 years old. So I am who I am because of my childhood and my upbringing.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of both of you as characters which comes from your childhood and who you are, right?
Absolutely. I think all of us are sort of products of our surroundings, and we've come to this conclusion that either you want to absolutely replicate what you grew up with, or you want to have exactly the opposite of it. You know, I've never seen anything in between.
Yeah.
But the thing is, for everybody, irrespective of your circumstance, I feel like your childhood is normal in the sense that your childhood is normal for you.
For you.
So it's very difficult to imagine what somebody else's life would have been like, but yours is always normal. So for us, I guess, I won't speak for him because even though we're the same age, we may have had slightly different situations. There was a lot of music at home, and I mean that's the obvious question, but also there was this whole cultural shift of sort of being born in the US and then coming back to India, and the interesting thing is when you're this first generation immigrant in the US, you don't fully belong, you're very conservative there, and then when we came back here it was such a culture shock because we realized that 90s India, or like late 90s India, was much more modern and open and advanced than the 1970s India that many of us were sort of reliving in the US because that's when our parents had immigrated.
Yeah. And that was an eye-opener for me, actually, when I went to the US, because they would ask very weird questions. You speak good English. How come? And I'm like,
Yeah.
I remember when my aunt also came in the early 2000s, all these doctors told her and my cousin that don't drink the juice in India and don't do this and don't do that, and there are so many very random things that my cousin was kind of telling us, and
Like, take your malaria pills, and I
Yeah.
was like, wow, okay.
But tell me, how is that defined? Like, if I have to ask you a more direct question, who is Bindu and who is Ambi? How would you describe the two of you?
Normally, people ask us to describe each other.
Okay, we can try that. And then I still want to hear from
So,
each
no,
of
I
you.
was saying we don't need to do that. I would say what from my childhood defined me is this ridiculously strong work ethic, right? And this whole thing of, like, in some sense, the show must go on, but not in a bad way. This whole thing of the only thing that's real is the hard work you're putting in, and the only thing that's real is you're showing up every day, right? So kind of having this opportunity to be spotlight adjacent made it very clear to us early on what is real and what's not. So we never got really carried away with this idea of being famous or being in the spotlight or being, because that's a consequence that you're not in control of. So the only thing that you're in control of is how much work you put in and how much you show up for your people. And in some sense, our dad has always been extremely selfless. So he has worked so hard. At the age of 75, he's still working ridiculously hard. Like, we have arguments with him saying, 2:00 is not a suitable bedtime for a 75-year-old. And then yesterday I'm having an argument with my daughter saying 2:00 is not a suitable bedtime for an 11-year-old. So it's just, and given the chance, I would be in bed at 10,
Yeah, I know what to say. Yeah.
And then I'm arguing, the sandwich generation is always arguing with my father and my child about things that are inappropriate. So that is me in a nutshell.
But while growing up, and I'll come back to you as well to know more, did you always know that there is the uncontrollable that is going to eventually come to you? Or was that also grounded in your upbringing in terms of don't expect the fame to just follow, just put in your effort? How was that perspective put in?
I think in some sense, and this is not something I'm saying negatively, because I think we've reached a point where we're very much at peace with everything that has happened in our childhood. We first experienced the not pleasant sides of fame, right? This idea of being a star kid, or the perceptions that people have of you. And it's really often the easiest way is just to, like, write star kids off. Like, you want to believe that they're not hardworking. You want to believe that they're all on drugs, they're all drinking, they're all fooling around. So we've had to sort of, in many circumstances, work twice or thrice as hard to be recognized, on par with people who don't come from backgrounds. Now, I'm not saying that we haven't got advantages, right? There's a crazy amount of privilege that we've had in terms of, if I have 8 degrees, I had the luxury of going and studying for so many of those, right? I've had the luxury of meeting some of the greatest musicians. But the flip side of that is you can be 8 years old on stage and still be judged against people in the prime of their career.
Yeah.
And there are people who are rooting for you, but there are also people who want to believe that you're an entitled brat. So I think being kids in that environment and trying to, protect ourselves from that, and now, like, we very actively try to protect my daughter from that as well, is that you see the good side of it, but you also see the not good side of it. So you look at your value as something completely separate from that. You're so grateful for the people who love and respect your art and want to engage with it. But you can't validate yourself on that, nor can you validate yourself on people who don't agree with what you're doing.
But that also means then at some point, that I'm thinking very early on, like most of us, we try to answer who am I as a question. I'm still trying to figure that bit.
Aren't we all? Yeah.
Yes. But I'm thinking you would have had some perspective around that very early on itself, to your earlier point of, we either go the complete flip side or, just the replica of our parents. Was it very early on that you started off really answering some of these questions, or...
Did I sound that profound? Because I'm not. I am very much a work in progress. I have no idea who I am. I just kind of, if I can wake up and get out of bed and kind of brush my teeth, it's a good day. I don't think I had any really profound realizations in terms of my identity or any self-actualization early on. It was just that we realized that, okay, fame is a monster that's outside our control, but what we need to do is we need to work hard, and there's no excuses for not working hard.
Yeah.
Like nothing. I remember when I had chicken pox, when I was like maybe 7, I thought it would be a great excuse to just watch TV like forever. And my mom let me watch TV for a day. And then afterwards, she's like, enough. You don't need to watch any more TV. And I'm like, but I love cartoons. And so she went out and she bought me drawing books. She's like, make your own cartoon.
Wow.
And I was like, this.
Wow.
So it's that, right, at the end of the day, and that is the strength that I think I draw on at the end of the day. When the going gets tough, it's like you just have to keep working.
Yeah. And Ambi, tell me more about you.
Well, I think for as long as I can remember, I've always enjoyed music and the process of making music. And I think very early on, I loved singing and playing the violin, and wanting to become a violinist came a little later. But I think to her point, it was initially kind of like trying to copy what my dad was doing. And I remember like when I was 3, there were these tiny violins. So I used to kind of, when my dad would be playing, I would kind of be around there and sit in a corner and try to kind of imitate what he's doing. In many ways, I think I'm still doing that. But
You're not in the corner anymore.
Yeah.
And the imitation is not. I think you've got your own creations.
But yeah, so I think like Bindu said, a lot of it at that age was about putting in effort and hard work. So one thing I've kind of learned from my dad is no excuses no matter what. So I remember, different times, like being very sick and still kind of going and playing. And I remember once, I was in the middle of my 10th board exams, and there was an important concert that I had to do. And at that time, playing an hour and a half was a big deal for me, and it was a solo thing. And I remember not doing a great job. So I kind of managed whatever, but it clearly was not my best because I had not practiced. My mind was elsewhere, all of that. So go home, and then, as usually is the case, my dad would start deconstructing the performance, which I loved, by the way. So he would start this, and then I started telling him, I have this exam in 3 days, and this is going on. It's like, great. Next time, just tell the audience. Are you going to go and start giving excuses to the audience? So then I just very quietly say, okay, please continue.
But this happens every performance, is it? After every performance?
Yeah.
That is so cool.
Yeah, so I obviously didn't think that growing up, but now obviously I am coming in with a different perspective.
I know the same things that would drive us nuts as kids are things that we are so grateful for at this point. Like this idea of don't measure the output, measure the input, because that's what you're in control of, or this thing of hold yourself to a higher standard and no excuses. Because if you're making excuses, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
You can comfort yourself with that, but nobody cares about your excuses.
I remember also. So I'm crazy about cricket. So I remember the 2007 World Cup was happening in West Indies. So the time difference was such that I was staying up till like 3:30 and watching the matches and stuff. So my dad saw that on day 1. Day 2, he comes down with his laptop and says, okay, if you're going to be up, let's work. So then I very sadly had the TV on in one corner on mute while I was sitting with him and working. And then one of the matches, I think it ended a bit early. So it ended at like 3. And then I'm like, okay, now I want to go to sleep. And it's late now. It's 3 o'clock. You really want to work now and all of that. So I convinced him and I stopped working. And then the next day, I realized that it became a big issue. My dad was actually very upset that we didn't finish what we had to do. I'm like, but it was 3. He's like, if the match went on till 4, you would have watched. I'm like, okay, fair point.
So he's like, our dad is actually incredible, and so the thing is, never once has he been that I told you so kind of person. So one thing that he's been extremely concerned about from the time we were very young is that anybody who's an instrumentalist should not play sports, because if you get injured, your career is over. So to both my brothers, he's always been like, no football, no basketball, no cricket, it's not safe. And that's something that came from his dad as well, right? His dad would say that, look, like no cricket and this and that. And so whenever, and Ambi's been very athletic, so he's always kind of wanted to play and kind of sneak around and, you know, just kind of go, or he would play cricket inside the house, which my dad would tolerate, and he smashed all the light fittings with the tennis ball. And so my dad is like, okay, this is safe, you can do. And so he's okay that the light fittings are getting smashed. He just wants him to be safe. But then once, a few years ago, Ambi had an injury from sports. But at that time, like, my dad ran to the hospital and not a word. He was just there.
There was no, I told you so.
Nothing. He just showed up and he was quiet. And he was talking to the doctors and he's trying to figure out, like, what is the best way for us to solve this problem. So the thing is, he will give you advice. He will hold you to a high standard, but he always holds himself to a higher standard. But when you need him, there's no judgment. He's there.
Yeah, and
So
I think
that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I think in that way, whatever we're trying to do, slowly, I mean, obviously I learned completely from him, and there was a time when I was kind of performing all the time with him, and I started doing my own thing, and but I think, like she said, that work ethic and just focus on working hard and on the input and not the output, because that's what you can control.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you're putting in that effort doesn't pay off here, it'll pay off somewhere else. So that kind of thing has been very inspirational, and I think that's something I always try to live by. And something that my brother said very early on also is never take yourself too seriously. So I think, because especially in the line of work, you get, sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the image of what other people are telling you. If somebody says after a concert you did a great job, doesn't make you great. If somebody says that they hated what you did, doesn't make you terrible. So I think you do projects or you do things that make you happy, and hopefully some people like it there. But at the end of the day, that should separate, you should find that separation between you as an artist or as an educator or as whatever else, and you as an individual. So I think that has been very powerful for me to kind of be able to separate that.
And I think that's very important as well. Like, for me, this is a career shift, right? Like, after 25 years in the industry, to the question of who am I?
Right.
It's very hard. Like, the first time someone asks me, who are you? And you normally introduce yourself as, hey,
With your company.
Yeah. Right? And then they said, no, don't introduce yourself as part of some company or some job profile or wife of so-and-so or mother of so-and-so or sister of so-and-so. Who are you? And it's a very daunting question.
It's a hard one.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one. Like, to even say, this is what I represent and this is what the value system is. It's very hard.
So what is your response now?
I think I'm a very curious person on a very self-discovery journey. I'm a learner. I like peace. So it seems to be these characteristics more than the others that I used to earlier. I used to say I'm an AI enthusiast and I'm la 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 la. And that's changed drastically now.
Right.
And to your point, I can totally understand there are some podcasts that do well. There are some posts that do well, some don't. But as long as you enjoy and you put in your full into
Absolutely.
it, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Well, thank you so much for that conversation. So, can you define adjectives for who you are?
Like I said, I feel like I'm a work in progress, but I'm generally a very grateful character. Like I would say, I was going to say sunny side up, but that would mean I'm a fried egg. No, I'm not a sunny side up. But I'm very like sunshine and rainbows,
Lovely.
but I'm not, I would say I still have a pragmatic side, right? And I'm still focused, and I kind of value myself by how much I show up for other people. And then sort of during this whole period of COVID, I developed what I'm now realizing, and I'm sure you're reading this new research as well, this whole idea of empathy fatigue.
Yeah.
And I did not know that was a thing. I haven't discussed this with you either. But now more and more people are talking about how they've gone through empathy fatigue.
Interesting.
Which is this whole need to just show up for everybody every day and take care of everybody around you and always be fine. And then you start cracking. And I think that's really what I went through over the last couple of years in terms of COVID. So yes, I'm still a work in progress. But, I was like I was talking to my sister-in-law, who's his wife, Shreya, saying that, because she's really into social media and marketing. And I'm like, you know what? I'm seeing so many other people who are talking about mental health, who are struggling, and very, very public people. So it's not just me. And I'm like, what is this? Like, is it like, is this a trending hashtag, or is this like a thing that people are actually going through? And then I realized that so many of us are struggling. So this mental health pandemic has been such a big thing, and you can't hide it behind sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah. And then it's also difficult, right? Like, for example, if you're not seeing through the conversation, you miss this by miles.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I've personally gone through, like I told you, right? When I took this switch from the corporate world to this, it was just, as simple as, for someone who doesn't have pets, I lost a dog. I lost my pet. But then
that's a family
it's like,
member.
Wow.
Yeah.
The impact was so massive, and I had to step back and think of, why is this causing so much of a churn in my head, and what is this? And it's very hard for someone to explain this, someone to even realize it, and I completely get. Yeah.
When I lost one of my cats, I was powering through. I was supposed to leave for Norway. I had so many, I didn't have time to process. I had time to show up. Like, I was there and I took her to the doctor every single vet visit. I made sure she had her medicines. Or I showed up, but I didn't have time to process. And then the trip got canceled. And I didn't even realize, but then I told my team, I'm like, great, now I can go home and cry. Because it is such a, and people are now saying in the US that you should have grief leave for pets, because pets are very much a part of our family. And I'm not saying that you take more care of your dog than your child, or that it's the same. I'm not getting into that at all, right? Yeah. Kids are kids and pets are pets, but pets are also family members.
Yeah. It struck me as to, it's something people treat as very trivial.
Yeah. It's like, oh, so your dog died? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I lost my favorite pair of shoes the other day.
Can we talk about work now? And I'm like, sort of thing. But also, it's like, the other side. Like, if I'm going through something like this, it's very hard for you to figure out, because I'm all smiling and I'm all happy, to your point about the fatigue. It's very hard to figure this out itself, isn't it?
It's very hard for you to figure out what you're going through, let alone somebody else who's talking to you.
Yeah.
And so when I start, a few people that I've spoken to are like, what? How is this? You're always happy. You are the happiest person. You're the benchmark of happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate with this. So how would you define who am I?
Well, probably... of late, so I've always
Don't say I'm a violinist. She will stop the recording right now and ask you to go outside.
No, I think I've kind of been a planner in general.
Really?
Yes, and so this has been, and I think this kind of defines me in a way, because that's very different from the rest of my family.
Oh my God.
So yeah, my parents are like the most scattered people that you'd meet. So they'll work extremely hard, everything, but they don't know what they're doing.
They are true artists.
Yeah.
But can I tell you, his planning doesn't always take him everywhere. So he's got Excel sheets for everything. He's got an Excel sheet of every concert he's done. And then when he finally moved into his own house last year, he started, I think a few months ago, he's like, so I have Excel sheets for my menu planning and this and that. And then one day he called in a panic and I'm like, so you finally realized that having an Excel sheet doesn't mean you automatically have that in your pantry, right? He's like, yeah, I need to plan. I need an Excel sheet for grocery buying. So like, it's like the whole...
Oh, I have to tell you this. So when I was working, I'm the most disorganized, the most lazy person you can ever meet. And then, switch over now and I prepared a Excel sheet for what are the monthly groceries you need to buy. And then you go to Amazon to start clicking them. It's not easy, it's not simple to actually map the Excel sheet to the grocery list to what you have.
That's what I told him, the implementation. So then he spent a whole day, him and his wife spent a whole day, I think it was a Sunday, going through their blessed pantry.
But things are sorted out now, I have to say.
Fair enough. But I was like, you need to realize that it's not an Excel sheet, because he's just like, my pantry is like this cornucopia, okay? Like, I just, like, I need, like, when I show up for people, right, I need to make sure that everybody who can possibly come into my house will have their favorite type of cracker. It's like, I'm that bad, okay? So they would just be like, oh, we don't have this. Because we live in the same building. Like, we'll just go get it from her bag. So when he sat down, and then he calls me. He's like, I'm gonna have to eat quinoa for the next week. I don't even like quinoa. So, I'm sure he's resolved it, but yes, he is a planner.
No, and I've kind of had these kind of different conflicts with the rest of my family because I plan so much, and my mom thinks I'm very rigid because once it's on my calendar, I hate moving anything around.
Okay.
So even if it's things that quote unquote can be moved around, so if I have kind of scheduled 7:30 to 9 is when I'm recording this, and even if it's kind of like a month away before the release, I must record at that point, because I kind of feel that, okay, fine, if I'm not following my my plan, then it's of no value. Then there's no point.
We must
planning.
respect the Excel sheets.
Yeah, totally.
It's very rare that you find creative guys
Exactly.
sticking to Excel sheets.
Have you read this book called Surrounded by Idiots?
Yes.
So it's, I mean, without going into it, I was telling him
I think you have to go into it, because without context...
I'm not calling him an idiot. That's not the point.
People who haven't read the book may think so.
Yeah,
I'm not calling him an idiot. But there are these very defined personality types, right? About, like, if you're a red or a yellow or a green or blue, and there's a certain level of organization, and that meets the creativity. And so that book was just revelatory for me.
Yeah, and so I think there are very clearly two sets of personalities within myself. When I'm kind of in the total artistic kind of space, then I'm kind of all over the place, very forgetful. Like a lot of times after shows, I'll kind of leave my iPad somewhere. All of those issues. And then when I want to be kind of this very organized person, then
I love this jugalbandi that's happening here.
So then it's very different. So I've also been called 11 steps planning for everything.
Who called you that?
I've been called 11 steps Ambi because everything. So,
why 11? Like, why not 10 or 12? Or...
I don't know.
Okay.
I think it had a ring to it, but
it doesn't though.
So I think so. So the issue is, in general, I've had this kind of very bad habit of not doing step 1 unless I see step 11.
Okay.
And that has kind of had its advantages and a lot of disadvantages.
But that's why we work well together, because I'm like, let's do it. What's the worst thing that could happen? And he's like, plenty of things. I'm like, but we won't know until we try. Huh? So it's like,
Actually, I have this split personality in my head. So for about 15 to 17 years, I was a program manager / product manager, which means you have to your point, have a vision of
Yeah.
6 months later what's coming, and then also identify what could fail, and then plan.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So on one hand, I'm very structured and things like that. At the same time, if you talk to my family, they will roll on the floor if you say she's structured, because there is a zero structure in the whole thing, and it's always a juggle
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
head. But you need to see the bigger picture. You
Right.
can always do I don't have you in my life.
well, yeah.
You see, it's only
Oh,
you.
your
That's the
sister
problem.
is fabulous.
Yes.
I have to say
Yes.
that.
You're talking about Nisha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have many sisters?
I have my own sister.
Ah, okay.
So there's a young girl called Sahana,
Okay.
who's also, the sounding
I'm
body.
sure she's
Yeah.
fabulous as well.
Yeah, so actually, during the pandemic, that kind of it threw everything up in the air, obviously, because
Yeah.
it's very hard to predict what's going to happen the next day. Forget 6 months or a year from then. So that kind of
Made you think.
made me think a lot, and then I was like, okay, fine, I will focus only on effort and not worry about anything else that happens. And for me, then that kind of pushed me into like a process. Like, okay, fine, I will just focus on the process. We will just kind of put our heads down and kind of just focus on the process. So for me, musically, that meant that, okay, I don't know when the next concert is. I don't know when the next project is. So I will work on a new piece and release a new piece every 2 weeks.
Right.
And I was like, that's great.
Yeah.
Really inspiring. But
Yeah.
I'll clean the toilets and you mop the floor. You know, because like we were living together and I'm like, this is important too. So let's find an Excel sheet and put our chores in.
Yeah, so so then I kind of decided, okay, fine, what are kind of small goals that I can do without kind of thinking 6 months ahead, or without thinking a year ahead, or any of those things. So that kind of changed my way of thinking a lot, and it's interesting to see how much of that is going to last now.
Yeah.
Now that quote unquote we are
Back in the.
back to normal and all of that. So I've been very fascinated to see what aspects have changed forever and what aspects are kind of
What are some discoveries for you? Because I'm going to lead you towards some of the skills that music teaches you. And this is one of the most important skills of, the practice and constantly rediscovering yourself. And eventually the dots start connecting at some point.
yeah.
But what are some things you discovered in this process when you all went through this?
You can.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to talk?
No. So initially, when kind of the first lockdown happened, it was like a 2-week thing and a way to discover yourself and work on skills that you didn't have, and for me, honestly, at that point, I was excited at the possibility of working and practicing for the sake of practice, and that was something I felt that we had lost, because a lot of the times you just end up kind of practicing for the next concert.
Yeah.
And so then you're not really, and I realized that along the way I maybe picked up some technical flaws, or I maybe started thinking in terms of a template, because when you're starting to think about, okay, I have 5 projects and I have to do this and everything is time sensitive, then you're just thinking, okay, what is the easiest or the fastest way to put this together? I hate to admit it, but that's what I felt happen. So then it was kind of nice to kind of say, okay, now you have 2 weeks, which became 6 weeks, and which became much longer. But it was a time to just practice and work on your skill building. So then it was nice to kind of take a step back and say, okay, fine. Now, what are the things that I really want to do long term? And this is when I have time. I may not have time
Later.
once life restarts and all of that. So if I want to kind of reinvent myself, if I want to work with this big picture in mind, and then you start thinking, okay, end of your career, what do you want to kind of, where do you want to be? What do you want to kind of do? What are the projects you want to do? So actually that was very interesting, and I started focusing a lot on different things. I started practicing a lot of piano, started working a lot on the Western classical violin, and then something very interesting happened because I started working on different things without any outcome, which was very different from me because everything had an outcome.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, fine. I'm doing all of these things. I don't know where any of it is kind of heading, and it's okay. Let's see what happens. So that was a very big change for me, and
So he developed and matured into me, basically.
so then I realized, okay, fine. Maybe this leads nowhere, but I'm doing this because it makes me happy.
Yeah.
Maybe at some point, maybe I'm not able to see it now, but at some point this will morph into this, and this will kind of so that kind of jumping off the cliff and taking that dive was new for me, and I think quite interesting.
How did it change for you?
Well, I mean, honestly, when the pandemic started, I went very much into this mama bear mode, like both in terms of SaPa and saying, how do I take care of our community, and how do I make sure that we're okay? How do we still reach the kids we need to reach? And so, like, that was one serious area of focus. And the other serious area of mama bear focus was my family, right? At that time, my husband, my daughter, Ambi, and I were all living together. And my other brother and his wife were in Australia, and they were kind of stranded and trying to come back. And then my parents were nearby. So it was just like, I wasn't worried about me. I was like, okay, how do I fix this for everybody? And then over a period of time, I started realizing that I hadn't thought about what I like and don't like, right? So for me, that learning has really been trying to identify what brings me joy.
Yeah.
And that's been pretty cool, because now I realize that even within music, there are certain things that bring me a lot more joy, or even at home, there are certain things that bring me a lot more joy. And you know, at work, there are certain things. So it's this idea of sort of moving up that, you know, the Maslow's pyramid of things, and sort of looking at yourself in that way. And I'm going to make a shameless plug here, but there's this app called Mamma Mia,
Okay.
which is just really cool. So if you have an iPhone, you should check it out. But it's like this planner meets mindfulness, and it allows you to tag things into different hats. So you start looking over a period of time of saying that, okay, I want to do so many things, but actually I'm just spending time on cleaning my house. And then you can mark things according to hats, according to time and your meetings, but you can also mark things according to, this brings me joy.
Oh, nice.
So you can say, like, for example, if under your house, trimming your flowers brings you joy, cleaning up after your cats does not bring you joy. And then you see at the end of the day, where am I spending time? And how much of my time am I spending on things that bring me joy? So it's really cool. And so for me, I kind of reconnected with music again, like I'm saying, in a different way, because it wasn't just preparing for concerts. It was really looking back at the kind of music that I like. And it was also kind of parenting this child that hit teenage really hard during the pandemic, and trying to, you know, instill habits in her. And then, you know, obviously anything that I do is absolutely wrong and uncool. So that was kind of my learning. This whole journey was around, you know, what is it that actually brings me joy, and what is just the noise in life.
And that's hard also, to your point, as you're going through this, when we don't have the time, we're in a rush, we don't think about this at all.
Yeah.
And it's only when you can step back and look at it and even segregate or bucketize it,
Yeah.
like, categorize it, and then you see a pattern. Where it's actually revealing when you
Yeah.
actually go through that experience.
Yeah.
Mamma mia.
Yeah.
You should check this out.
You should talk to the founder as well. She'd be great for this podcast.
Oh yeah? She's India based.
She's Bangalore based.
Okay. You should talk about my podcast in some other places like this.
I'll go tell the app founder about the podcast.
This segment was brought to you by.
Download Mamma Mia now.
So I want to, this sort of leads to a good segue of, music itself. So for me, it's been an integral part of me. When I'm angry, I have a set of music that I listen to. I'm a big fan of heavy metal and death metal, and my mum used to go bonkers when I used to play them. But it sort of released a whole lot of that energy that I had. At the same time, I was telling you last time, I love the Lalgudi Tilanas. I enjoy the violin. I enjoy a good Indian classical music. I like all kinds of music. And they sort of, depending on the mood, they sort of set you up. Even when I'm working, for me, it's an integral part. Like, I listen to EDMs when I'm working because it sort of helps me focus. What are some things that you've seen in your lifetime so far as skills that music sort of gives to an individual?
So
That
I
gives
think,
a lot.
Yeah, it does. And when you look at adults or kids, and there's some benefits that happen across the board, right? One is this whole idea of concentration and focus, and music really helps you build that, whether you are learning or just listening, right? It helps with focus and concentration, and that resonates with why you need to listen to music when you're working. And again, I mean, there's research that shows, but also anecdotally, that you're not going to be listening to your favorite songs because otherwise you're going to be singing along and you're not working, right? So you need something that kind of blocks out the outside noise, but at the same time isn't so engaging that you're singing and dancing along to it. And there's also the idea of the ISO principle, right? Which is where your mood is sort of mirrored by the music that you're listening to. So if you are in a place where you need to let off some steam, listening to calming music is not the thing that you need. You need something that's going to mirror where you are, and then you can listen to calming music. But if you're really kind of wound up, or similarly, if you're in a very lazy mood and you just suddenly want to put on energetic music, it's not going to work. But you're going to move there when you listen to music. And for us, another thing in the last couple of years was really how we're using music to help children build social emotional learning and how they build a cultural identity, how they become global citizens. So how can you use music as a gateway to kind of understanding other things? But we've seen with ourselves and with our students that music really gives you an anchor, and it gives you that discipline, and it gives you that focus, and it also brings you joy, right? It's just It's such a true form of expression.
Absolutely. I think fundamentally we wired that with, suddenly there are like 15 people in the background today.
Hello, 15 people.
We're having a team meeting.
So, where was I? Yeah, for me, I feel we're wired that way as humans as well. If you see, our heartbeat is like sort of rhythmic. The way blood circulates is rhythmic. Everything, there's a rhythm to it. And I think everybody enjoys music. There's some memory that gets triggered when you listen to something. And I think it's a very, very important skill that one needs to start picking up. Either just listening and enjoying it, or taking on an instrument or vocal to really learn. What has been your experience in terms of life skills?
So a couple of things. I think one, obviously, a lot of my dad's teachings have been through music, and you kind of have seen a lot of great musicians, and you kind of see the effort that they put. I've seen a lot of musicians kind of skip meals before concerts so they can practice and learn the pieces and all of that. So that commitment is something that I've always kind of been amazed by, and so that is one thing that I've kind of learned through music, and to kind of I won't say chase perfection, but chase excellence. That's always been there, and I remember one of these amazing artists that I worked with at that time when I was quite young in my teenage years. He told me something very powerful, and he said, don't try to play a perfect concert because that doesn't exist, but try to play a concert that's right for your mental state at that point.
Nice.
Which I never thought of it that way before. And because I was always trying to kind of play, and I remember that at one point I was always trying to play the perfect performance, and once I actually thought that I did, thinking that okay, fine, every note was in tune and everything was fine and whatever, and there happened to be a recording of that, and I heard it back and it was really boring.
It was like an Excel sheet.
Yeah, so then I listened to that, and then I heard I was thinking about this guy told me, and then I'm like, okay, fine, maybe I shouldn't chase that, but I should kind of see, okay, fine, this is how I'm feeling and this is how I can kind of express it, and that became very powerful for me. And also to that point, I'm not sure if this is very related, but I've kind of felt different things by playing the violin and playing the piano, because the violin for me has always been my career, things that at least I've defined myself by. So if a concert doesn't go well, or if I don't play very well, then that affects me mentally, saying that okay, I'm not good enough, or I've not put in enough work, or all of these things. So I felt that I've been very tightly wound when it has come to the violin, because that's how I define myself. But the piano has been very different, because I'm not a pianist. I've learned piano over the years, and I'm playing the piano because I enjoy it.
You like it.
Not because I want to go on stage, or not because etc. So I learned to enjoy music in a totally different way, and kind of as an amateur, as somebody who's just kind of trying to let go. And in that way, I've kind of enjoyed the struggle of like playing the same thing 10 times, but I'm just not getting it right. But it's okay. I suck at the piano, but it's fine.
It's still fine.
Yeah. So I felt that I've been able to bring that learning into the violin a little bit, which has been great for me. And I think that one kind of big skill that I've learned with music is that when you practice, when you're at home, when you're working, then you're chasing that excellence. If a phrase is not okay, you play it 100 times. Sometimes it takes 3 months to get this one small phrase right. So you're really kind of, and I think that's quite similar to archery, where discussion that we were talking about.
Yeah.
So that's something that I've learned. But then when you go on stage, you just let everything go. If something doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Okay.
And you just kind of let go and you give your best, and whatever your best is on that day, that's what it is.
For me, I have to tell you, boss, the last time, this is our second one, right? We're trying. The last time, I was in complete messed up state, and I was like, how can this happen? Because this was the first time. And to his point, the perfectionist mind would start having these really bad talks. So what an idiot. We checked the whole thing, and we both were like going bonkers. What happened? But you guys were like like saints, like a Zen state. And he's like, it's okay. And you also were like, it's okay. And I felt like I want to believe that it's got to do with this whole patience that you'll have built over years, because you, as musicians, and that's something we don't have as a skill in the outside world that much. Or am I like completely?
And I think it's that. And also, Ambi says this a lot. And just by quoting him, don't assume that I think he's wise or anything like that.
I think you've said enough things before this
Okay.
for them not to think.
That I
Started with the
didn't
idiot book.
It was a sensational title. The book doesn't call people idiots. Because I feel like I need to say that. But intent is so important, right?
Yeah.
So clearly there was very good intent behind it, and sometimes things are out of our control,
Yeah.
right? And it's just that. So I respect the intent that's gone into it. And I respect that we're all sitting in the table and, the cable god was not on our side at that point. And that's that. And then we do our best. And then sometimes we just show up the next day or the next week and we do our best again. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we learn from music, but also something we learn from working with kids.
Mm.
Yeah, I think a lot of times also, sometimes we have seen some artists in different situations throwing a tantrum, or in their head it's justified. Or say, for example, a car comes late to the airport, or you go for a concert and the sound is not ready. Whatever, there are a lot of things that can go wrong in a kind of event like that. But intent is very important, and sometimes it's important to see what the other person is going through. I think we have felt that because we've also been on that side organizing things, and so it's very easy to kind of sit there at that point and say, okay, I don't care, my stuff is not ready. But sometimes an organizer, like we've been in situations where an organizer is trying to single-handedly do something because they are passionate about something, and they had to pick up their kids somewhere. That's why they're 15 minutes late. And at that point, if you don't understand what the other person is going through, it's...
Unless everybody's comfortable, it's going to be a miserable experience for everybody, right? So, I think if, as the human race, we can start with the basic assumption that everyone's doing their best until you are proved wrong. And sometimes people are not doing their best. Huh? I have to admit that.
Yeah.
But if you work with the basic assumption that everybody's doing their best and no one is out to make your life unhappy or miserable, and everyone's just trying to make the world a little better, and if you start with that place and you keep going along there, it's just a much more pleasant mental space for you to be in, right?
And I think to that point, one thing that we always try to do is, no matter where we are, is to try to make best of the situation. So if you can help, great. Or if you can just sit in a corner and let other people do their thing. If it takes 5 minutes, it takes 10 minutes, it's okay. But how are we collectively going to have the best experience, the best day, the best outcome possible?
Because we're all on the same side, right?
Yeah.
We all, at the end of the day, want the same thing.
Yeah, we're all trying to do our best.
Yeah.
And I think I want to lead it towards, did I mess up something?
Yeah, you killed the cable. Now the cable gods are sad again.
We have Ambi. Last time he told us, I think it was the cable. We were like,
We have to reschedule this another 2 weeks from now.
So one thing I also learned is it allows you, or it teaches you the art of collaboration. And you guys have done so much of collaboration worldwide. How does that work? Because you've not practiced together. It's just like I probably would reach out and say, hey, I don't know, I'm just making up this thing. Oh, hey, let's do something. How does that work? How do you create music with random musicians who you would have just heard?
Firstly, you never call them random to their face. That's an important one. But yeah, you can go ahead with the serious answer.
Yeah, well, I think... and I think we get this a lot from our dad, but we've always kind of been collaborative people. And for me, it's also about seeing different people that can inspire me to do things a little better. So I always look at artists that can inspire and challenge my skills. So a lot of times... I'll kind of be on YouTube or Spotify or a lot of these things, and then I'll just be blown away by what somebody in different corner of the world is doing. And sometimes you don't see things that can come together with, and that's fine. Sometimes you listen to this and immediately you're like, okay, fine. You know what? If I can write a piece, and I've always loved that challenge as a composer. If I can write a piece where we can bring this artist and something that I'm doing, and make sure that everybody is comfortable, and you're creating something where everybody can do their best. And for me that's very important, because I'm not only thinking as a musician, as a violinist there, but I'm thinking as a composer, and thinking if I'm creating this piece and everybody's not able to do their best, then I failed as a composer. So for me, that's always been a very, very interesting way for me to push myself in different areas. And a lot of times, I mean, you learn so much when you're working with musicians who have essentially very different thought processes. And so I end up trying to chase that, because I like being in situations where I'm thinking of something and 10 other people are thinking of completely different things. And I think that really pushes me as an artist, really kind of challenges me and inspires me to do better. So that's always been kind of a big focus for me. And I think when you're looking at collaborations, it's important to really study what the other person is doing. So, and I've been fortunate enough also to kind of go as an artist to different collaborations. If somebody else's piece, and you are one part of the puzzle. So when I'm looking at it from that angle, I'm trying to see, okay, fine. If I'm bringing somebody on into our project, how can I make sure that they are very comfortable? And in order to do that, you have to study where they're coming from. True. And try to make sure that they can kind of walk in and say, okay, fine, I understand this music. This I can do, and I will bring out the best that I can do in this piece.
So that's also about, and I'm sort of drawing a parallel or an analogy with teamwork. Oftentimes, we work in our own zones, and within that zone, we're very comfortable.
Yeah.
But when we start looking at what the other person brings to the table, and then there's learnings in this process, you're creating something new, but you're also growing as an individual.
Yeah, and I think for us also, we found that a lot in our shows, in different things where, again, like when you're looking at the big picture, you realize that it's not about you, it's about the whole thing. So a lot of times, I may not be at my best in a particular concert. I may be playing okay, but my head is somewhere else, or whatever situation. My violin is not cooperating, my fingers are not, whatever. But the mridangam player may be having the night of his life.
Yeah.
Or the keyboard player is just kind of going into his own zone.
Rocking it.
So then at that point, we're able to kind of look at that and take a step back and say, okay, fine, today, if it's our keyboard player's night, great, he's going to take the show to a totally different level. Yeah. And then it doesn't matter if I've played the longest solo or she's sung the most powerful line. At the end of the day, people should say, okay, the concert was good. Yeah. And we should be happy that, okay, fine, a member of our team has kind of really given his A+ game.
And for us, like, it's what we really enjoy is when people come to us after a show and say, God, you guys looked like you were having so much fun. Yeah. Like, and that's the thing, it resonates so deeply with people when you're sharing that energy and you're sharing that experience, and nobody is keeping track of, whether the notes are right. When you're practicing, you need to make sure the notes are right? Mm. But when you're on stage, it's really about sharing that joy. And I always say that, like, life is a team sport.
Yeah.
And the moment you give that, you receive like twice of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so everybody's on top of their game when they're in an open environment, when they're in a happy place. And the thing that is often hard for people to understand is you can be ambitious, very ambitious, and I think that both of us are, and still be non-competitive.
Absolutely.
So we are never in competition with anybody else. We're always trying to collaborate and figure out how to
Get better.
I mean, I was contacted a week ago by this young lady who's doing something very interesting in the music education space as a startup, and she wanted some mentorship, and she's like, I hope it's not conflict. I'm like, look, there are 1 billion people in this country. There is no way I will ever teach them all. This is something we all need to do together.
Yeah.
So, like, life is a team sport. And if you're able to create an environment where everybody's able to do their best, at the end of the day, we all rise.
Yeah. Yeah.
And music is such a great example of that, because if you have artists who are nervous on stage, or like, what is this guy going to say? Is so and so going to be upset if I play a long solo or this? And like, we have so many photos. Actually, the most spontaneous, my favorite photos are the ones of us just laughing. Like, we did this show a few years ago in Trichy, and our piano player was just on a totally different trip. He started somewhere, he ended up somewhere else, and then he got into, like, he started playing these are a few of my favorite things, and we just lost it. It was like one of the best shows we've ever played in terms of where he was going. And then at that point, both of us were like, okay, go ahead, this is great.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's about. At the end of the night, he was like, wow, this was fun. And we're like, yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Yeah. No, I think it's very important. You bring I didn't pause at all through that conversation, because there's so many takeaways there. One about how you look at yourself in competition, about how when there is a team, there's one star, let them shine, step back. In the end, you're creating something as a team. There's so much that I didn't want to pause at all over there. I want to also take the conversation towards the mind, right? I read that 1 in 4 kids are bullied. And if that's the situation in schools, I can only imagine what's happening in the workplace. Because it's these bullies that have grown older and older and older and mastered the whole art of it. And so there's passive aggression, there's
microaggressions.
Absolutely, right? And so, and we call it culture, ultimately, in a bigger, in a sophisticated way. But in the end, we're talking about the same thing. Music plays a big role in breaking that thing for a child who's gone through it. Both for the bully, because the bully at some time was being bullied, as well as the one who's bullied. How has your organization and you guys been, maneuvering through that? What's been your experience in that space?
This is an incredible question. And honestly, I have to tell you that we've thought a lot about kids being bullied, but I've never really given credence to adults being bullied. So I'm gonna take this in 2 parts. One is, when we look at kids, we realize that they need to develop emotional intelligence, right? They need to understand empathy, self-awareness, and music is a very powerful way to do that, for them to create the sense of self, or what am I feeling, or how am I representing what I'm feeling, and is this appropriate behavior, is this not appropriate behavior? Because when kids act out, they're not evil. They're just not in control of what is happening to them. I was speaking to a psychologist recently who was saying that, when kids hit teenage, they can experience the entire gamut of human emotion, like all the extremes. And yet, the front of their brain, the rational side, is not yet developed enough. That doesn't kick in until they're like 20.
Yeah, and then they're also exposed to the social media and
so they've got all these emotions out there, and they don't know how to handle them. And because their brains are not developed, they're not being idiotic on purpose, right? They're not trying to be difficult, but genuinely, when they are melting down, it's because it feels like the world is ending. From our perspective, we can be like, hold it together, it's just a pizza. But from their point of view, it's really something that is earth-shattering. Yeah. So when you kind of help kids work on this emotional intelligence from the time that they're younger, the hope is that you're giving them the skills to understand what's going on inside of them. And if they're able to do that, then they're able to process what's happening outside. So maybe that can help the bullies understand that bullying somebody is not going to make them feel better, but it'll also help the kids who are on the receiving end of it, because we can't stop it altogether, realize that it's not about them.
Yeah.
And when we're looking at adults, one thing that we've really tried to do at SaPa, with all the people that we're working with, is kind of build this, and I know a lot of people say this non-hierarchical culture, but for us, it's really kind of seeped down to gender, age, experience, not relevant.
Yeah. How do you create an inclusive space irrespective of that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I value you as a human being, and I will hear your opinion. And I never want you to say what you think I want to hear. To the point, and to build this culture, I've done ridiculous things. We've both done ridiculous things. We're kind of horrible bosses in that sense, because we're you can tell people no, don't call me ma'am, don't call me sir, and then they'll still call you ma'am. And I'm like, just don't. The only thing worse than calling me ma'am is calling me auntie, right? And then they're like, no, ma'am. And they think that you're joking, because a lot of people say, don't call me ma'am, and then get really offended if they call you by their, by the first name. And I was like, the reason I don't want you to call me ma'am is because it's much easier to say, hey, Bindu, I think you're being really stupid, than saying, Bindu, ma'am, actually, I wanted to, tell you that, and you don't want, you're setting it up for that. So we had a choir with our teachers a few years ago, and we were looking at a nice outfit, a matching, I'm not going to say uniform, but costumes that they could all wear, right? And for the women, we found these beautiful blue saris with pink borders that had violins on them, and then we had to go and find kurta material for the men. And we went to this fabric shop, both of us, and we were standing in the basement of this fabric shop, and we found some really ridiculous fabrics. Okay, we found this really hideous vomit green thing with tablas on it. And it was by any stretch of imagination, it's just very, very questionable. Okay, the guy who decided that this should be printed was having an off day. So they had this in vomit green and they had this in pink. So I took a picture of it and I put it in our teachers' WhatsApp group, saying, I found the perfect thing for the boys to go with the saris that the women are wearing. And then pin drop silence. And I'm swiping and I can see many people have read it. Okay, and then we have one female teacher jumps in after some time saying, wow, violence for the women and tablas for the men, how great. And I'm like, okay. And then someone else is like, can I not wear the pink? And then after a few of these kind of very muted statements, one guy is like, this is really ugly. And I'm like, thank you, God. I'm like, you are the guy that I trust. And would you guys actually have worn something this ridiculous instead of telling? So, just things like that have kind of made people realize that we put our money where our mouth is. So they're very open to be you could have joined yesterday. You can be 10 years younger than me, although if you're 10 years younger than me, you'd be a baby. And we're very kind of flat that way, because most of our women who have come back after a huge gap. And so a big part of that is building their confidence up, because these women are super efficient, they're brilliant, but they often lack confidence because of the gap that they've had. And then we have young people who get kind of sidelined often because they're young and young people's opinions don't matter. And then we've had this whole thing of women don't know what they're doing. And then if you go into schools, they don't trust young men because young men are just, So we're all kind of a band of misfits. But yeah, the culture is really important. And I think music is a very, that's the thing that we have in common that holds us together, and that builds our empathy and that builds our social emotional learning.
Do you think more companies should actually be taking on some kind of a music initiative? And let me ask this question in a different way, right? The pandemic actually brought out the whole anxiety and depression bit in the workforce side as well. And I feel that music is, I'm someone who's not, who's only been a listener, and I've told him I've gone twice to play the violin, and I said, oh God, I'm this kind who needs instant gratification. and the violin needs 6 months to just figure out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I feel music would play a huge role in really breaking this whole anxiety, depression, because no one talks about it, but a lot of them are going through it.
Of course.
And you need some space where you can sort of just be yourself and discover yourself in the right environment as well, be surrounded with the right people. Plus, it sort of boosts your focus, confidence,
Endorphins,
right?
dopamine,
A
serotonin,
whole
all
lot
of these things,
stuff.
right? Yeah.
And so, do you think it's the right thing to do in organizations? And have you explored or tried something around that?
Yeah, I think companies should have a chief wellness officer at this point. I think it's quite critical. We have explored a couple of things, and one was during the pandemic, we started sessions called Music for Joy, where we just first started reaching out to friends of ours who run companies like hospitals or waste management or people who are really kind of at the front and center of things. And we just did sessions like we would do for kids, where, just everybody log in and let's sing and let's like move around and let's clap our hands and let's do silly things. And it was really powerful, not only for them, but also for us. And the other thing is we've seen this huge spike. I mean, we've in some sense considered ourselves a music school for kids all this time, but we saw this huge spike of adults who wanted to come back to something that was meaningful to them, who want to sing or who want to play the guitar or who want to play the tabla or who want to play the violin, and that is just something that is special to them. And they have realized that life got in the way and career got in the way, but actually music is something that brings them joy. So I think that we need to, as we're going forward as leadership, we need to realize that there is life beyond work. Because our teams have realized it. So we need to, and people are now saying that retention is hard and this and that. Well, there is also research that shows that money is not the only motivator for people. So you can keep upping offer letters and things like that. But if you need people to stick, you need to take care of them completely. You need to give them access to things that help their balance.
I recently wrote this article about how we sort of have positioned the Montessori style of teaching only to kids and probably till the 8th grade. But I ran this little experiment for my workshop where I got students from different backgrounds and different companies at different experience levels. To your point, you're not the experience, you come with the age or the background. And I also got a couple of them from not so supportive backgrounds. And when you put them together without that foundational thing of I'm so and so and so and so, it breaks the ice, and there's so much collaboration and so much learning from each other as well as a cohort itself. And I think that's the whole power of music as well, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I
think also this concept of community music really helps. I think in a lot of companies that would probably make a huge difference, because there are a lot of quote unquote skills or lessons to be learned there without actually overtly doing any of those things. And the moment you're kind of in that environment and everybody's kind of having a good time, learning from each other, and a lot of times when you're doing community music, you're all not necessarily doing the same thing. So somebody's maybe clapping, somebody's playing a hand instrument, somebody's singing. So then there's a lot to be learned of, trying to figure out, if one person is one bar off, how do I fix the thing from here? There are a lot of things which are learned subconsciously. I think that makes a huge difference when that is kind of brought in to other aspects of life.
How does one start? How does one start on this journey? If you want to explore music at this age, I'll tell you why I'm asking this. So I married my kindergarten classmate, right? And he's got this, when you meet him, he's got this very simple voice. But when you talk to him on the phone, it's amazing. It's like a really nice.
Is that
voice.
how your kindergarten romance started on
No,
the phone?
no. I was just blind. And so I think he went for one of these workshops on presentation, and someone told him, "You've got an awesome voice, you should learn singing." And when my daughter was learning Kathak, she learned that for 7 years. And so every Sunday and Saturday, he had to go at 9 in the morning. There was one classical
The
music
things
teacher.
we do for our kids, right?
So he enrolled in this classical music class, and so he started singing. Initially, it was like horrible, but then it started getting better and better, and I started loving the voice. Like, you know, you start falling in love with this creation that's happening at home, and it's amazing because the house environment changed. It was like sort of a jugalbandi of sorts that was happening. The music that was being played was different. It just changes the whole
Environment, right?
space
Yeah,
itself.
yeah.
So, for someone who wants to start, where does one start?
Visit sapaindia.com.
This segment was brought to you by www.sapaindia.com.
Ta-da!
Yeah. So here's the thing. As adults who are overachievers, the most important thing is to realize, as he's pointed out, that you don't need to have a goal when you do it. It's the process. So join a class, right? Be okay with not being great. But just kind of
Enjoy the
place
struggle,
yourself
yeah.
in that. Surround yourself with the music. It's not about being on stage, and it's not about, you know, being the best singer, and it's not about any of that. It's just about finding a space where you're finding joy with the music. And so as adults, sometimes it's hard because we're so driven and we're so motivated and we're so stretched and we're so busy, and
that's
you
what
know,
we're taught, right? Everything has to have an outcome.
Yeah.
Where is this going in 6 weeks, and what's happening in 6 months, and all of that. But it's nice to kind of have something in your life that's not driven by that, and it's nice to kind of enjoy that struggle and say, okay, fine, I'm not there yet. I'm still struggling with this, and it's okay. I mean, as long as I'm enjoying the process.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of moms, more than dads, although dads deal with this as well, kind of feel like they're being selfish if they do anything for themselves. Like if I'm doing a class, if I'm spending an hour a week, this is time that I could be spending, you know, with my child on her math homework, or this is time where I could be taking her for another class. So there's a point where you need to realize that you doing something for yourself is really important as well. So find something that brings you joy and just be okay with it not being great. And there is so much flexibility, and you know, you don't have to practice an hour a day, but consistency is important, especially when you're slightly older, right? Kids can get away with skipping practice a little bit. Adults really can't. So you know, you slide back very quickly. So even if you're just spending 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes, yes, we all have crazy busy lives, but you know, treat it as your meditation, as your mindfulness. Even if you're doing 5 minutes a day or 7 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, do it. You know, and just start. I mean, don't wait for, because I've seen people who are really in love with the idea of saying, oh, you know, I used to love this in college and I want to go back, but I can't manage, and I'm waiting for this event to happen, then I'll be more free, and you know that never happens.
Never happens.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to make space for things within your life.
Yeah. So, one fun question.
Were these not fun questions this far?
So this is going to, I think this is sort of putting you in a spot, sort of a question. What pisses you off about him? In same way.
Well, I think,
How long do we have?
yeah.
We can make this as part 2 of the video.
Part 2 is just like your subheading is the siblings go at each other. I think sometimes that he's so structured and organized, so that can be really frustrating for me. Like,
God,
you
I think
can't
it's
just-
like
can't just wing it.
it's like Shamir and me. Oh my God, this is me telling my husband he's so structured.
Yeah.
He'll be like,
Like,
sorry.
can't we just wing it? You know, and then like, for example, when we're setting goals or making plans, I will be like, let's do everything and like let's make this plan and tomorrow let's change it, like because we can do other things. And he'll be like, no, let's be like really reasonable and small. I'm like, think bigger, yo. And I'll be so frustrated with him. And then for me, it's okay if things don't go according to plan. Because I'm like, life, destiny, universe, it's wonderful. So I think I answered what drives me crazy about him, but also what drives
him crazy.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a very interesting point, because when we set goals, I think she tends to kind of set these very ambitious, sometimes unreasonable goals in my head. So like, okay, if we get 80% of that, then we've done great things. And I am like, okay, fine, let's set a goal here, and then we should do at least 120% of that.
So in terms of the output, we're both in the same place, right?
Yeah.
We both in our minds know that we want to reach this level. But for me, I'm like, let's be here. And he's like, let's be here. And so,
Yeah,
but I
because
think we've realized over the last decade of working together that it's okay, you know,
Yeah,
because we
because-
know that actually we're going to end up here at the end of the day, and that's why we work well together.
Because if it's on the Excel sheet,
Yeah.
then we can't be less than that. So
And I'm the, like, and the beautiful thing is his wife is like me. Thank you, Karma. Okay. So, and we'll be in the meeting and we'll be like, where was that Excel sheet? Do you have it? And she'll be like, no, I don't have it. What's this? And we'll be like, sorry, my screen share is not working. Could you share the Excel sheet, please? Like, I have made the plan, and the moment the plan is made, it's out of my head because I've ticked it off on my list, right? I have to-do lists. And one of my to-dos was to make the sheet, and the sheet is made. I have moved on in life. Whereas for him, the sheet is like this God document.
It's a reference.
Yes, we must obey the sheet.
she used to mock me all the time, because she said, so I have this Excel sheet of all the performances that I've done since
Who
I think
does that?
early 2010s. So no, there's a reason though. So I
I
was
want to hear this.
no, because I was at somebody's friend's concert, and they were like, they had gone back to this city after like 7 years, 8 years or something, and it turns out that they performed the same repertoire, and they had no idea. Obviously,
Oh,
they
in the
were-
same city is
yeah,
it?
so
Ah.
there are like hundreds of shows in between.
Yeah.
And then they happen to play the same raga, same piece, same everything. And then few people came for both shows, and then they said, "Oh, you last time also you did the same
thing."
exact
And
thing."
trust Ambi to take this as a life lesson. And I'm the kind of person who will be like, we'll make the set list, and then I'll leave the set list backstage. And then for me, like, all shows are really candid, right? So I'm making jokes, I'm making fun of our drummer, I'm talking to the audience, and in between that, I'm like, oh, where's my sheet? What's the next song? It doesn't matter. What shall we do? And so that is kind of...
Yeah. So for me, I'm looking at, okay, fine. If I'm going back to this city, and if somebody's been to the last 3 shows in the city, even if they're like 15 years apart, I need to make sure that I'm not doing the
Wow.
Blue.
same thing. So that's the main reason. That's why I have the Excel sheet.
No, I can
Yeah.
relate to this a lot.
She's so nice.
And I think my husband would be.
And the thing is, his wife is like me, but my husband is like him.
Yeah, I think we need some people
Yeah.
like this to complement us always. And I think that's why, you know.
So
the
so
same-
my husband will always be like, "Geez, are you incapable of making decisions?" I'm like, "No, I make decisions. I just make lots of them." So he will take like 12 times the amount of time to make a decision, but then he will never change his mind for all of eternity.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how can you be like that? You're so rigid.
By the way, I love the way your husband plays the
Oh,
violin as well.
awesome. I will.
Big
I will
fan.
So he said that it was always his idea because he's quiet, right? And he's very reserved. And so he always thought that if he ever wanted to impress a girl, he could just play the violin and it would be
Did
done.
that work?
And then I'm like, and then when he met me, I'm like, oh God, another violinist.
Violin.
And he's like, you know, it was the one time in my life that I wished I played the mandolin or something. So I'm like, the one thing that I have too many of in my life is violinists, right?
But that's a I would love to be surrounded by them, actually. Seriously, I think that's one of the most beautiful instruments in
Sure.
this
Just when you go home, or preferably in your journey on the way home, Google or look up on YouTube double stop scales
world. Okay?
played out of tune
Okay.
and listen to that. Then we'll talk.
I'm going to do
So,
that.
so you get to hear these great maestros on stage, but I've known him since he was born. It's taken a while to get perfect. Because like he said, he will do the same thing again and again and again. And if something is not going well, he will do it more. I'm not talking about now. Now it's a pleasure to listen to him play. But 10-year-old Ambi was not always a
I
pleasure
can
to listen to.
imagine.
15-year-old Ambi, also not a pleasure to listen to.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, yeah.
I've had a lot of fights with my brother as well, because initially when we were kind of building the house, we had the plan was to have like a big room for my brother and I together to share, and then we had one particularly bad fight, and us being like two young boys, it got very physical and all that. So my dad is like, no, you both need separate rooms, otherwise you're going to kill each other, and all of that. In hindsight, I'm very glad we had that fight, because I got my own room. But then we ended up
And his room was bigger than my brother's for some reason.
So we just had like a
Had to
cupboard.
fit the Excel.
Exactly. So we didn't have a wall between our rooms. We just had like a cupboard, and so every note I played was heard there. And a lot of the times, so like when we were teenagers and all that, my brother went to med school, so he was studying all night, and then I was practicing all night. And then he used to come to my room and like, why do you have to practice this? What is the matter with you? Can't you
Stop
play
this song immediately.
These double stops are like the worst thing. I go to sleep and I still think of this. Can't you play something nice? What is the matter
So
with
double
you?
stop. You should explain what double stops are.
Yeah, so there are these scales where you're playing multiple notes at the same time. So you're kind of practicing chords and those kind of things, and they're very difficult when you start. And if you're slightly off, it's very, very obvious, because you have two notes, so you have a reference. So
if you're playing one note that's slightly out of pitch, it's okay. But if you're playing two notes together or three notes,
like immediately you can tell that it does something to you. If
and
you're
then
not
you do the higher octave, and so it's like someone is just drilling into your brain.
Oh, God.
So yeah, he was not a fan.
So I have a neighbor, they have a 14-year-old child, and he's learning the drums and the guitar. And then they played loud, but he's getting better. He's getting better. I'm all cheering and rooting for him. All right then. Well, Ambi and Bindu, thank you so much. I had a fabulous time talking to you, and I hope you all had
So much fun.
This is great.
Yeah.
This was a lot of fun.
Thank you
Thanks a
so
lot.
much.
Thanks a
Thank
lot.
you.